Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome our friend and Fox News contributor, Mercedes Schlapp.
How great is Marisol? I mean, just complete rock star. And you all from the Florida Federation of Republican Women, I mean, seriously, you are all such an amazing group. You are the heart and soul of this country, and you are why Florida is becoming more and more red, like my dress. Marisol, I just want to tell you, you do not want a Wikipedia page because they put a lot of bad stuff in there as well. So try to avoid the Wikipedia page. And then if you have a husband who loves to tweet, I always tell him just pray a Hail Mary before you put a tweet out, because God only knows you'll have the New York Times calling in like 2 seconds. But unfortunately, Matt couldn't be here with me. We had a great time down in Miami, my hometown, with Matt, and you know, he's my gringo husband, so it's a little Cuban girl with her husband down there, and we got to be with the Miami chapter, and it was truly amazing. What great energy, and he sends his warm regards. He's actually with 2 of my daughters in Indiana. They were, my daughter goes to the University of Notre Dame. Nothing against the University of Miami, but so they were together. And then I've got a teenage daughter up in D.C. in Virginia right now, and she's going, Mom, please try to make it home tonight. So, you know, in addition to that, I have 5 kids in total, and then I've got 2 with my brother who lives in Alexandria, Virginia. So, needless to say, us women, we are remarkable. I mean, if you need to get the job done, you call the woman, right? You know, if you want to win elections, you call the woman. And then, of course, what do the Democrats do? They don't even know what a woman is anymore. You've got men who are pregnant now, biological men who are playing in women's sports. They have lost their minds. But I will want to say, being here back in Florida, I just love coming back home. I mean, I've been living in Virginia now for some time, and obviously I've raised my children there, but Florida has always been so close to my heart because it defined who I was and who I would become in the future. And I think, you know, I think of what my parents did, where they fled Cuba, where my dad basically fought against the communists in Cuba. He became a political prisoner for 6 years and then was freed. And he taught me at a very young age, around the kitchen table, to say, your liberties are very fragile and you can lose them very quickly, because he never thought in a million years Cuba would fall to communism for so many decades. And you know what? When you lose those freedoms, it's really hard to get them back. But with that, then, it was, you know, my calling to go into public service, and really had the great honor of working for 2 presidents, for President George W. Bush and the best president in the whole wide world, President Donald J. Trump. And truly, I got to see a side of Trump that I don't think many people get to see. He had huge respect for the women who worked for him in the White House. He brought us in at the most critical moments. He listened to our advice, and he took the right actions for America. And sadly, you've seen the left unhinged trying to destroy this man over and over again. And it's not going to stop at Trump, ladies and gentlemen. They're going to go after every single top Republican who pushes back on the radical agenda. But I will say, you all are amazing. You know what's at stake. You have the fiercest governor in our country, and it's not Gavin Newsom, thank God. It's Ron DeSantis and the classiest First Lady, Casey DeSantis, who I think have done an incredible job of really advancing the conservative and the American causes here in America. And here's some good news for you all. At least you don't live in Martha's Vineyard. What I don't understand, okay, so I was watching this mayor from Martha's Vineyard. They are so freaked out because 50 illegal immigrants showed up in that area. And then they have the audacity to say, we don't have capacity to house them. All right, so Texas is taking in hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants. Arizona is taking in hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants. And they say they have no room. I found a place for them. It's President Barack Obama's mansion. It's got 30 acres, 7 bedrooms, and 8.5 bathrooms. And I'm sure they have lots of help there for these individuals. And don't get me wrong, when you're in front of the Naval Observatory, which is where the border czar lives, I think her name is Kamala Harris. Then you had this nice man who came over the border illegally saying, yeah, the border is open. It shows the hypocrisy of the left, where they say one thing, where they talk about sanctuary cities, where they're very supportive of open border policies, and yet they are dishonest to the American people. They lie. They say that the border is secure. And that, as you know, because we're so much smarter than they are, is misinformation. But you never see big tech censoring them. But then let's take you back to 3 weeks ago, when MAGA Republicans, like ourselves, are called extremists, a threat to our democracy. Okay, we've all been in politics for a long time. His speech was beyond one of the most divisive, full of propaganda, and not a presidential speech, but a political advertisement. And what about those red lights? I mean, it was literally like Satan was gonna come up back to earth, for crying out loud. Look, let me tell you something. I know that you guys have been watching the news, and the New York Times and the Washington Post and all these are saying, it's not a red wave anymore. You know, like Biden's got his groove back and he's wearing his cool aviator glasses. And, you know, the Democrats are going to do great come November. Well, let me tell you something. The writing is on the wall. Democrats will lose big in November, and it will be a red wave. All of a sudden, then you saw the New York Times basically say, wait a second, no, wait, the Democrats were overestimating on the polls. And let me tell you, you here in Florida, because of the incredible work that you're doing, you're the model for the rest of the country on how you need to organize, on how women need to be part of this really important election process that is going on. You all need to take this organization and just keep growing and growing and growing to all 50 states. And with that, I will tell you, I mean, when you break down the speech, I mean, Democrats truly, their focus is, their only villain is President Trump. And I'm going to add to that Ron DeSantis, because they're trying to tear down President Trump. They're going to work on trying to tear down Ron DeSantis. And with that, and you all have to be prepared for this, because this is coming. And then it's adding that you're also a villain. Millions of Americans like yourself and those loved ones who simply, what do we want? Greatness in America. We want to believe and believe in our freedoms and protect our freedoms. We believe in secure borders, economic opportunities for all American, and yes, the Constitution. Happy Constitution Day, by the way. In Biden's America, let's talk about Biden's America. MAGA Republican, extremist, parent, domestic terrorist, Republican, racist. You approve of America First policies or voted for Donald Trump? A semi-fascist. These words are so anti-American, it goes against everything we believe in. And truly, the only fascists here are the Democrats, whose goal is to attack anyone who disagrees with them. Their goal, one-party system. You disagree with them, they want you to shut your mouth. But what's our job? We stand up, we speak louder, and we fight back. They want government censoring us, not allowing them to even question them on anything, not even on potential election fraud. They call us election deniers. Let me tell you something. The original election deniers are the Democrats. They called President Trump an illegitimate president. They called George W. Bush that he didn't win the 2000 election. This comes from them, but now they turn it on us. And another word they like to start using now? Far right. So when you have these prominent Latinas who happen to be conservative rise up and talk about pro-family, pro-school choice, pro-America, the New York Times, far-right Latinas. That is an insult, and we cannot allow them to win on these words. We are not ever going to be called Latinx. It's not going to happen because it is an insult to the Spanish language to basically try to keep changing our language. We are not going to accept pronouns because there's only one pronoun here, and that is USA. And let's think about this when it comes to this authoritarian leadership that we're seeing right now in the White House. The FBI will cover up for a son. His name is Hunter Biden. Okay, I have a chocolate lab and his name is Hunter, and everyone kept asking me, why did you name your dog after Hunter Biden? I was like, I didn't know Hunter Biden was that bad. But the corrupt and powerful FBI will raid a former president's home, go after the pillow guy, guys, seriously? And subpoena over 60 people. And then on top of that, you have the January 6th committee, it is a witch hunt and a bias against low-level staffers that had nothing to do with January 6th. But their goal with these young staffers, they want to make sure they never get a job again in Washington. There was one dear friend who now works with us at CPAC. They gave her the subpoena the day of her wedding. Yes, this is weaponizing a government institution. You had the FBI going to Facebook and saying, oh, let's not talk about Hunter Biden. And I remember during the presidential election, whenever I would go on the media back in October, whenever I would bring up Hunter Biden, the liberal media would say, sorry, there is not enough evidence and you're not allowed to talk about Hunter Biden on television. It was a cover-up and a scam between the Democrats and the media. A pure collusion, a real collusion between those institutions. But this is what I find interesting, because I really believe a real leader attacks problems and not people. When you have such a weak and woke president where the leftists are willing to divide us and call us enemies, if we do not toe the line and bow down to their radical agenda, well, I've got news for you, Mr. Biden. This group right here, we're never bowing down to your agenda. We at CPAC just completed CPAC Israel in July. It was truly an amazing experience. And we had the opportunity to meet Natan Sharansky, who was a Soviet political prisoner, who Ronald Reagan actually was able to negotiate his release. And he used a quote that I take it with me wherever I go. Society without dissent cannot protect human rights. So he says, society without dissent cannot protect human rights. And as a Cuban American and knowing the experience of so many of my friends and Venezuelans, now Colombians, Nicaraguenses, those from El Salvador, the individuals who come from many of these communist countries know that if they are not allowed as citizens to question the government and instead are bullied by one party to only accept their beliefs, it leads to the destruction of our republic. And it is why we need to allow for dissent. We need to allow for dialogue and disagreement. We need to question the government and not just fall into the masses. And so when we talk about Constitution Day and we commemorate this really special day of signing of the Constitution, it is the bedrock of the United States that we can live in this free society where life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness will always be the fundamental principles that we need to cherish and protect. And it is our obligation to do that. And it is our obligation to teach our children and grandchildren and nieces and nephews. Get them off of TikTok right now. It is run by the Chinese. They want to dumb down our kids, and we have to make sure that we preserve our children. Because what we are seeing in the schools is debilitating. It is something that I don't think in our generation, in our lifetime, we ever thought we would be where we are today. And when you think about the fact of the huge negative aftermath of the lockdowns, the Dr. Fauci lockdowns, which you guys didn't have to experience as much, but these kids who lost their time and their proficiency in English and math due to these COVID lockdowns, and the mental health issues that we've seen come from these children, and you've seen these kids, that you're seeing pornographic books being pushed in these schools, and they're pushing this gender confusion curriculum for these children. It is horrific. And thank God for Ron DeSantis for signing the parental rights law, which we know bans teachers from giving classroom instruction on sexual orientation or gender identity from kindergarten to third grade. This needs to be at a national level. We need to take our education back for the sake of our children. And I know you all are fighting every day to get that done. Also, I think another great victory here in Florida is the winning of these school board seats because of DeSantis' support of so many of these fabulous candidates. Because as you all know, local elections matter just as much as federal elections. In fact, COVID taught us if you have a bad mayor, it's going to turn out bad in that city. And if you have a bad mayor, you're going to end up with a lot of crime. I mean, I remember I was up in New York doing the show Outnumbered, and we were talking about the Eliza Fletcher story, right? She's a mom of two. She was the one that was killed by someone who should have never been out of jail, a violent offender. So Eliza's story, it reminded me that this could happen to anyone in America. I worry when my daughters like to go running in our neighborhood. And we need and deserve to make sure that every American feels safe in their neighborhoods. And these Democrats are running these cities into the ground. And you know it's bad when CNN is saying crime is up in all the Democrat-run cities. So if CNN is saying it, then they know the Democrats are in trouble. And it's so critical to make sure that we protect our Second Amendment, because if there's not enough police on the ground, that we have the opportunity to defend ourselves and defend our families. So going back to we're securing the border comment, which I still don't understand. You know, I think when you're looking at the fentanyl coming into our communities, the 1.8 million immigrants who were apprehended, this is clearly an invasion on the border. And that White House press secretary literally blames Donald Trump for the problems on the border. I mean, they're the most delusional administration that I've ever encountered in my lifetime. Just the most delusional. Then they have the audacity to say, yeah, inflation's not that bad. We're doing great. I'm like, okay, Helen Aguirre knows this because we worked together at the White House. The White House, like, our press secretary could have never gotten away with the amount of lies that this administration talks about every single day coming out of that White House briefing room. And let me tell you a little secret. The fake news, it's real. They would come to us, the reporters, and be like, yeah, I want to ask you about a story, about a meeting that happened in the White House, and what is your comment? So I'd say, this is what happened in the meeting. And then they'd come back and say, well, we're not going to use that. We're going to use a source close to the White House, who wasn't even in the meeting, as the story. And that's what the liberal media did every single day to undermine the Trump administration. And the other one trying to undermine the Trump administration was Nancy Pelosi. Oh my Lord. So I think we should plan on Fire Pelosi, Save America to be the big theme for November. So I'll tell you a fun White House story. President Trump was, it was during the time that the impeachment, they wanted to impeach President Trump. And the president really, he didn't want us to hit Nancy Pelosi forever. So we'd bring up Nancy Pelosi, and Nancy, they'd be like, no, no, no. He'd go, don't hit Nancy, don't hit her. And I was like, okay, we're gonna wait to hit her. Finally, she has a press conference. She says, impeachment is, we're gonna look at the articles of impeachment, we're gonna file them, we're gonna vote on them. He is so mad. He comes out in and he says, let's go after her. And I was like, okay, this is gonna be fun. So he goes, just wait, just watch what I'm gonna do. So she comes over to the White House for this meeting. It was an infrastructure meeting. It was for the infrastructure bill. We're waiting in the cabinet room. She's sitting there. There's other Democrat congressmen there. And literally he walks in, as Trump always does, and he obviously takes over a room. And he looks at her straight up and he says, I'm not going to work with you anymore if you're going to move forward with these articles of impeachment. And he literally turns around and leaves the room. And poor Nancy started sweating so much, I thought she was going to faint. And she was like, well, I mean, he's so irrational. I mean, this is ridiculous. And we were just all like, that was really cool. But let me tell you another great story at the White House. So when the president, this is something that really teaches you a lot about how we need strong presidents, really, with the right policies in place, because we know he was so effective in really implementing America First policies. I mean, I've worked with two presidents, and he did more for America and for building up America and Americans than anyone else. And so I remember we're at we walk in to meet with the president, and he's like, he wanted Mexico to add 2,000 security officers to the border. Okay, this was his big ask. So, the State Department comes in, they're like, sir, this is never going to happen. I'm sorry, we can't do this. He's like, no, we're going to do this because I'm going to put tariffs on Mexico if they do not give me 2,000 security officers. So State Department goes back to Mexico. Before you know it, all the Mexican officials show up at the White House. They're in the Roosevelt room. They're trying to stop the president. Please, no tariffs, no, bad. President's like, tariffs are coming on. You got to get me 2,000 security officers. The State Department people are like, this will never happen, never happen. An hour later, we had 2,000 additional security officers at the border. It is about a promise kept and making sure that you deliver, and that is what the president did every single day during the White House. He fought hard to stop the drug cartels. He fought hard to stop the human traffickers. We saw how the numbers of illegal immigrants continued to dwindle. And our border patrol agents were invigorated, and they were fighting hard every day to make sure that we had control of our border. Because once we lose our border, we lose our country. And, we look at, obviously, you guys are just so blessed to be in Florida because you don't have the issues that we have throughout the country. Who wants to live in a blue state? No, exactly. But the reality is that there is a crisis happening in so many of these states. You have 2/3 of Americans that are feeling what's happening with the inflation. And I'm sure you saw the other day the party at the White House. They signed the Inflation Reduction Act. They brought in the most old-time singer, who I didn't even know who he was, really, James Taylor. And they were like taking selfies at the White House while the Dow was plunging. So anyone who's been in communications should have stopped the whole thing and said, no, we're done. We're not doing this party. We can't party when people are hurting. It makes no sense, right? But these politicians, they don't get it. And this Inflation Reduction Act, it's more of an Inflation Expansion Act. It's more of a Climate Obsession Act. They're going to want you to buy an electric vehicle. Nothing against you owners who are electric vehicle people. And get rid of gasoline-run cars. And that is why we do not live in California. But can I say, I really want Newsom and DeSantis to debate. It would be epic. Epic. I think if you see the governor, the next time you see him, you should just say, just do it. Just do it. I mean, do you imagine, like, it would be like we should do like a big party around it. It'd be like a debate watch party. And I know who will lose that debate, that's for sure. But you're seeing this happening in states like California, where they're literally telling you, put your thermostat at 78 degrees because our electric grid can't handle it. Oh, and by the way, you can't charge your electric vehicle. You're like, how am I going to I'm just going to have to ride a bike. I mean, how am I going to do this? But look, at the end of the day, if we fire Pelosi, if we make sure the Republicans win the majority of the House so that we can make sure that there's lots of hearings on Dr. Fauci, and make sure we bring Hunter Biden and his laptop to Congress as well so he can be investigated. And if we can stop the colluding between the FBI, the Washington Post, and the Department of Justice, who are going after our former president and MAGA Republicans, then we are headed in the right direction. You know, and I know I sound angry, but that's the Cuban in me. And I know that I deliver a lot of negative news, but that's because I live in the swamp right now. But I have great hope. I do, because I get up with Matt Schlapp every morning after the kids go off to school. We sit on the front porch, we drink our cup of coffee, we read the Bible together, and I know that God has not given up on this great nation. We are called to be happy warriors, and we are called to take on this battle. And we all have a role, which is so beautiful. It's like we all have these incredible talents. And I was talking to one of the presidents at the villages who said, we made 10,000 calls last week. That makes a difference. Because they don't want to hear from the talking heads. They want to hear from you. They want to hear from the people that count. The people that are working every single day, knocking on doors, making phone calls. You are the ones that are making the difference. You're the ones that inspire us to keep going on the fight. And I thank you for that, because it is hard. It is hard on our family. We've had plenty of times where there's been threats on our lives, on our children's lives, but I know that God protects us every day and that we're not going to be silenced by the bullies. And yes, they have called us extreme and a threat to democracy. We know that we are the only hope to save our country. And time is running out. There is an urgency, and I will tell you there is an urgency. I know in Florida right now it's beautiful beaches, lots of sunrises and sunsets, and you've got a great governor that protects this state, but things can change on a dime. The storms will come, but we can survive the storm because we need to send Nancy Pelosi back to San Francisco so she can get her hair done. But I will tell you, I have had the great honor, after the campaign, I was pretty depressed. My kids told me, they're like, Mom, you didn't talk for like 2 weeks. You were like in yoga pants, no makeup. And I was sad. I was really sad. Matt went out to Nevada to work with Rick Grinnell on some of the election situation out there. And I remember going through it, and you have to pick up the pieces and say, okay, well, it didn't work out this time, but we can figure out a way for it to work out next time. And I'm very hopeful that it's going to work this November, that we will make sure that Marco Rubio goes back to the Senate, that we make sure our Republican candidates win, And they are fierce. My goodness, those congressional members are fierce in this state. And we will make sure that the Republicans, when they get in power, because they are going to get in power, when they get in power, they better take these Democrats on, and we have to hold them accountable. It's not like, footsie under the table. It's not holding hands. It's not like kumbaya. It is investigations. It is going after the scams of these Democrats. It is stopping the progressive agenda that has hurt our children and our families. And it is making sure that they know that we are going to stop this Biden radical agenda that's been penetrating so much of our country. And we played the trailer of the Culture Killer documentary. If you haven't seen it, you can get it on Prime Video. And we did this to talk about how what we have seen Americans, everyday Americans, go through, where they feel that their rights have been taken away. And we tackle issues like education and women's sports. And we talk about, the challenges of what BLM did. BLM, which is really the Homeowners Association, because they buy $1 million homes and not help anyone in the African American community. And the violence that came from Black Lives Matter and Antifa. And that, let me tell you, was the start of these corporations bowing down to Black Lives Matter and Antifa because they were so scared. And let me tell you, we have a message to the woke corporations. We're going to keep coming to you and telling you stop with this woke agenda, because a vast majority of their customers, they're Republicans, they're conservatives, and they need to stay out of politics. So, again, after I went through my depression, I feel like I'm in therapy right now, but I went through my slight depression. The children were like, okay, Mom, you got to pull it together. Matt Schlapp said, all right, you're going to come work with me at CPAC. And I was like, okay, let's go do this. And it's been amazing. It's been really amazing what we've been able to do. We have 2 national conferences a year. We've been having them in Orlando. We are going back to DC next year, sadly, but we kind of need to. I'm sorry. I know, it was a contract thing. I had little say there, and we did a huge one in Texas, and what we have found is that the conservative movement and the grassroots, we are stronger than we have ever been in this country. It is only growing. We are only connecting and unifying and really making a difference. And CPAC now, we have our show online. It's called America Uncanceled. You can get it's on podcast and online, where we give you 15 minutes quick of what's happening in DC and across the globe. And we really have committed ourselves to becoming the megaphone for the conservative movement. We drive policy, we build messaging, and we're also rating these politicians and keeping them accountable that they have to stay on course. And what happened was something that was fascinating. CPAC then, we had 34 countries come to us and say, we want to partner with you. Because freedom is not just an America phenomenon that we treasure. It is literally a global phenomenon. And we have gone to CPAC Brazil, CPAC Israel that we talked about, CPAC Japan, CPAC Korea, CPAC Australia, and CPAC Hungary, and the list continues to grow. So it is something that has been an amazing journey for us, but it shows one thing, and the one thing is that we are the beacon of hope for the rest of the globe. When my husband protested with the Hong Kong protesters 2 years ago, I remember I was very concerned for his safety. He went with a small group, and he had given me several phone numbers. It was Mike Pompeo. It was at the time John Bolton. It was a group of them. He says, okay, so like if something happens, you got to call these people. I was like, okay, well, make sure nothing happens. So he goes to Hong Kong, and I remember I was praying the rosary with my 5 girls at the time, and my little Lucia, who is quite a character, she's kind of like Matt Schlapp without like the anger issues, is the way I explain her. I don't mean anger, because he's really not in there. He is a happy word, but like she's so funny. She was the one that on her vocabulary quizzes would write "Go Trump" all the time. And so I'd be like, you really shouldn't do that. Like, let's not do that in second grade. But she did it. And so we were praying the rosary, and each of the girls took a decade of the rosary, and we'd say an intention. She was 7 at the time, and she said, okay, she goes, Mom, I pray that those Chinese communists don't put my dad in jail. And I thought to myself, if this 7-year-old gets it, the rest of America should get it. And so it is our message to go out there and explain the horrors of communism, the horrors of socialism, the horrors of fascism, the horrors of these individuals who believe that their idea is the only idea, and if you don't bow down to them, that they will take you down. Because we are such a great country, and we are a country where we should allow for freedom of speech and freedom of religion and all these wonderful, beautiful values and principles that we have in America. And so we can't take it for granted because it's shifted quickly. And we got to teach our kids, listen to me, don't become a crazy liberal, okay? Like, that's not, you might think it's cool, but it's not what builds this great country. And it is our duty as an organization and our duty as women and men to come together to tell this great story of America. And so while the left will attempt to destroy our culture and our language, we need to push back and say enough. We will stand boldly for what is right, truth, and real. And yes, there is a truth. We are not going to cause this chaos that we've seen the Democrats cause in so many of these states. And we are the last line of defense to save America, and we will be victorious. God bless you all. Thank you for your incredible work, and God